It is 5:15 in the morning in Chefchaouen, and the town is still the color of a swimming pool with the lights off. Every wall, every staircase, every doorframe is painted in a shade of blue that shifts depending on the hour. Pale as the sky just before dawn, then deep as ink once the sun clears the Rift Mountains. Somewhere below, a baker's already sliding the day's first loaves into a communal wood-fired oven, because in this town, most families still don't own an oven of their own. They bring the dough. The baker does the rest. That single detail tells you more about how this country runs than any guidebook chapter could. This is Morocco. Not the version airbrushed onto a travel poster, but the one that exists at 5 a.m. before the tour buses arrive and the postcard version of the country switches on for the day. Say the word Morocco to most people and they'll picture one of three things: a maze of alleyways in Marrakech, a camel silhouette against orange dunes, or that one blue staircase everyone's seen on social media without knowing which town it's actually in. All three exist. None of them explain how the country actually works, day to day, for the people who live there year-round, rather than for the week a camera crew or a backpacker passes through. Morocco sits at the northwest corner of Africa, close enough to Europe that on a clear day you can see Spain from its northern coast, just 14 kilometers across the Strait of Gibraltar. It's home to well over 35 million people, split between sprawling cities like Casablanca and Fes, and small mountain and desert communities that still run on rhythms older than the country's borders. The question was never really whether Morocco is beautiful. Everyone with a phone camera has already answered that one. The real question is what that beauty is standing next to. The wealth beside the hustle, the ancient beside the improvised, the sacred beside the transactional. Now the part almost no visitor expects. Fes al-Bali, the old walled core of Fes, has been continuously inhabited since it was founded around the year 789. Inside its walls sits the University of Al-Qarawiyyin, founded in 859 by a woman named Fatima al-Fihri, and it's recognized as one of the oldest continuously operating institutions of higher learning on Earth. Long before anyone was filming drone shots of the Medina's rooftops, students were walking those same alleys to study law, theology, and astronomy. The city didn't build its reputation on tourism. Tourism showed up later, to look at something that was already there. But look closer, and the daily grind tells its own story. Breakfast in most Moroccan homes is simple: missamin, a folded flatbread, dipped in olive oil and honey, alongside a glass of mint tea poured from height to build up a thin layer of foam on top. Locals sometimes call it Moroccan whiskey, a joke about how central it is to hospitality in a country where alcohol isn't part of daily social life. Lunch tends to be the big meal of the day, often a tagine, meat or vegetables slow-cooked in a cone-shaped clay pot until the sauce turns thick and dark. Friday is different everywhere. It's the day for couscous, steamed and served with 7 vegetables in many households, a tradition tied to the weekly mosque gathering. Traffic in Casablanca or Marrakech is its own kind of chaos. Mopeds weaving between donkey carts and Mercedes taxis, all sharing the same narrow street with what looks like no system at all, but somehow rarely turns into gridlock. Cats are everywhere in the Medinas, tolerated and even fed by shopkeepers, treated less like strays and more like unofficial neighborhood residents. Extended family still anchors most households. It's common for 3 generations to live under one roof, and decisions about marriage, work, or moving abroad are rarely made by one person alone. Friday holds a different weight than the rest of the week. Shops in smaller towns often close for a couple of hours around midday prayer, streets empty out near the mosque, and the couscous lunch that follows tends to stretch on for hours, with neighbors and extended relatives drifting in and out of the same table. Weddings run for 2 or 3 full days rather than one evening, with a henna night, a procession, and a reception that can pull in several hundred guests from both families. None of it is scaled down for convenience. A wedding is treated as a community event, not a private one. Markets or souks run on a completely different logic than a Western grocery store. There's rarely a fixed price tag on anything beyond packaged goods. A spice seller, a leather worker, or a lamp maker will quote a number expecting you to counter. And the back and forth is less a scam and more a social ritual, one that locals go through with each other just as often as with tourists. Leather tanning in Fez still happens the way it has for centuries. in stone vats sunk into the ground at the Chawara tannery, where hides are treated with a mix that includes pigeon droppings and quicklime before being dyed in vats of natural pigment. Cow urine and mint leaves are handed to visitors at the entrance for a reason, and it isn't decoration. It's one of the few places left on Earth where you can watch a centuries-old industrial process happen entirely by hand, in the open air, with no factory walls in sight. Clothing carries its own quiet signals. The jalaba, a long hooded robe worn by both men and women, remains everyday wear in smaller towns and a formal choice in cities, especially for Friday prayers and celebrations. Women's fashion ranges enormously across the country, from full traditional dress in rural areas to Western clothing layered with a headscarf in cities like Casablanca, to no headscarf at all, depending entirely on personal and regional choice rather than any single national standard. That range surprises a lot of first-time visitors who expect one uniform picture of Moroccan dress and instead find a country where the answer depends on which street you're standing on. Hold on to that. We'll get there. First, let's talk about the part of the culture people travel across the world to witness firsthand: Nawa. Nawa music and dance trace back to communities descended from enslaved West and Sub-Saharan Africans brought north centuries ago. What started as spiritual and healing ceremonies, built around trance rhythms, iron castanets called krekeb, and a three-string bass lute called the gwembri, has grown into one of Morocco's most distinctive art forms. In Essaouira, an entire festival now exists to celebrate it. The Nawa World Music Festival, running since 1998, draws musicians and crowds from across the globe every summer. Watching a Nawa performance up close is less like watching a concert and more like watching a conversation between the living and something older than memory. UNESCO recognized Nawa as part of humanity's intangible cultural heritage in 2019, which tells you this isn't a tourist show dressed up for cameras. It's a tradition Morocco fought to protect on its own terms, long before anyone with a camera showed up to film it. Resilience runs through this country's history the way the blue paint runs through Chef Chowin's walls. Morocco was never fully colonized in the way much of the rest of Africa was. It existed as a French and Spanish protectorate from 1912 until it won independence in 1956, but it kept its monarchy and much of its own legal and religious institutions intact throughout, which is part of why its identity feels so continuous rather than reconstructed. Fez itself has weathered sieges, plagues, and dynastic overthrows across more than 1,000 years, and its walls still stand. More recently, a powerful earthquake struck the High Atlas region in September 2023, devastating mountain villages near Marrakech. Communities there are still rebuilding, and the resilience isn't an abstract idea in that context. It's neighbors sharing what's left of a harvest, and stonemasons passing down centuries-old building techniques to reconstruct homes the same way their ancestors did. Sorrow here tends to get folded back into daily life rather than set apart from it. Grief and celebration happen in the same week, sometimes the same room. Now here's a fact that says more about a whole country than any single statistic could. Morocco is one of the only places on Earth where you can surf the Atlantic in the morning and stand on top of snow-capped mountains by afternoon. Jebel Toubkal, the highest peak in North Africa, rises to about 467 meters in the High Atlas range, and it's snow-covered for a good chunk of the year, while beach towns like Essaouira and Tahazot sit just a few hours away, pulling in surfers chasing consistent Atlantic swells nearly year-round. Most countries pick a climate. Morocco seems to have collected several. Here is where the armchair daydream becomes a spreadsheet. A guided day trip into the Sahara from Marrakech, ending with a camel trek and an overnight desert camp near Merzouga, can run anywhere from $40 to $150 for a tourist, depending on comfort level. Meanwhile, many guides and camel handlers doing that same trip day after day take home a small fraction of that, a wage that, in more remote regions, can sit well below what a single night in a mid-range riad costs a visitor. That gap isn't a scandal exclusive to Morocco. It's the quiet math behind a huge share of the global travel industry. But it's worth sitting with for a second, because the cheapness that makes a trip feel like a bargain is often a distance measured in someone else's hours of work. Rugs tell the same story. A hand-knotted Berber rug, woven over weeks by a single artisan using techniques passed down through generations, might sell in a Marrakech souk for a price that, once split between the weaver, the cooperative, and the shop, leaves the person who actually made it with a modest cut. It's not a hidden conspiracy. It's simply how a long, tangled supply chain tends to work when it stretches from a Berber village workshop to a tourist suitcase. The same math shows up in food. A tagine that costs a visitor the equivalent of $8 or $9 at a restaurant near Jama el-Fna might use ingredients that, bought at a neighborhood souk, cost the cook a small fraction of that price. The gap covers rent, staff, and the simple fact that restaurants near major squares can charge more because footfall is constant. Step 2 streets back from any tourist landmark, and prices on nearly everything drop, sometimes by half. It's not a scam either direction, it's just proximity to demand, priced accordingly. If you're finding this kind of breakdown useful, a like and a subscribe genuinely help more people find videos like this one, and it costs nothing but a tap. This is the part of the title's promise that's harder to romanticize. The danger, or at least the parts of Morocco worth being careful around. Petty scams are common in the busiest tourist zones. Unofficial guides who latch on to visitors near the Medina gates and later demand payment for directions nobody asked for, or shopkeepers who quote wildly inflated prices expecting a round of bargaining. It's rarely violent, but it can be exhausting if you don't know it's coming. Certain border regions, particularly areas near Western Sahara and some stretches close to the Algerian border, carry travel advisories worth checking before a trip. And like most major tourist cities anywhere in the world, pickpocketing spikes in crowded squares like Jama el-Fna after dark. None of this makes Morocco unusually dangerous. Most visits pass without incident. But going in informed beats going in naive. Now for the part that's easier to fall in love with. The Sahara itself is staggering in scale. It covers roughly 9 million square kilometers across North Africa, and the dunes near Merzouga, called Erg Chebi, rise up to about 150 meters, shifting color from gold to deep orange to almost pink as the sun drops. Along the coast, Essaouira's fortified ramparts, built in the 18th century, earned UNESCO World Heritage status in 2001 for how well-preserved the old Medina remains. And Jama el-Fnaya, the main square in Marrakech, was one of the very first sites UNESCO ever recognized as a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity back in 2001. An entire square protected not for a building, but for the storytellers, musicians, and food vendors who fill it every single night. It's less a tourist attraction and more a living organism that happens to reset itself every evening at sundown. Inland, the landscape keeps shifting in ways that feel almost unfair for one country to have. Toubkal National Park wraps around North Africa's tallest peak and shelters wildlife like Barbary macaques, one of the only monkey species found north of the Sahara, alongside golden eagles that ride the thermals above the valleys. Further south in the Argan forests around Essaouira and Agadir, you'll spot goats climbing directly into the low, twisted branches of argan trees to eat the fruit, a strange, genuinely real sight that looks staged but isn't. Argan oil pressed from those same seeds has become a major export, much of it produced through women's cooperatives that keep the profits inside local communities rather than routing them through outside middlemen. Between the mountains and the Sahara, the Dades and Tadra gorges cut through red rock canyons so narrow in places that the walls climb 300 meters straight up on either side of a road barely wide enough for 2 cars to pass. If this country is going to pull you in, here's where to put your feet first. Marrakech is the obvious starting point. Loud, chaotic, and a fair introduction to Medina life. Best explored on foot with a rough plan and a willingness to get lost anyway. Chef's Chaouan up in the Rifa Mountains is worth the detour for the blue streets alone. Best visited early morning before the day trippers arrive from Fes. Essaouira offers a slower pace, fresh grilled sardines by the port, and some of the best wind conditions in North Africa for kitesurfing. For the desert, Merzouga is the standard jumping-off point for camel treks into Erg Chebi, though it's roughly a 9 to 10 hour drive from Marrakech. So most travelers break the trip up through the Atlas Mountains and the Dades Valley along the way, stopping at Kasbahs like Ait Ben Hadou, a fortified village so well preserved it's been used as a filming location for major productions. Fez, for those who want history over Instagram backdrops, remains the country's cultural and academic heart. A few stops rarely make the highlight reels but should. The Ouzo waterfalls, a few hours from Marrakech, drop nearly 110 meters over red rock cliffs, and troops of Barbary macaques hang around the base of the falls, generally more interested in tourist snacks than in the view. Imlil, a small Berber village at the foot of Toubkal, works as a low-key base for day hikes even if you have no plans to summit the mountain itself. And the coastal town of Asila, up near the Strait of Gibraltar, gets a fraction of the visitors that Chefchaouen does despite having its own whitewashed medina and a wall of rotating street murals repainted every year for an August arts festival. Bring cash for the smaller towns. Card readers thin out fast once you leave the major cities, and expect bargaining to be part of nearly every souk transaction. Not an exception to it. Timing matters more than most itineraries account for. Spring roughly March through May, and fall September through November, sit in that sweet spot where the Sahara isn't punishing and the coast isn't cold. Midsummer works fine for Essaouira and the mountains, but turns Marrakech and the desert into an endurance test for anyone not used to dry heat above 40 degrees. Ramadan, which shifts earlier by about 10 days each year on the Gregorian calendar, changes the daytime rhythm of the whole country. Many restaurants stay closed until sunset, and travelers who plan around it rather than against it tend to have a smoother trip. There's one more thing worth knowing before you book anything. Morocco isn't a single climate zone pretending to be one country, and it catches first-time visitors off guard almost every time. Marrakech can hit 40 degrees Celsius in summer, while Chefchaouen, only a few hours north, stays noticeably cooler in its mountain air. The Sahara swings the hardest of all, scorching by day, then dropping close to freezing after midnight once the sand stops holding heat, which is exactly why desert camps hand out heavy wool blankets even in the warmer months. Pack for 4 seasons in one suitcase, because depending on the route, you may genuinely need all 4 in under a week. So here's the mirror. Morocco isn't one thing pretending to be many. It's genuinely several countries stitched into one, and every version of it runs on people working long hours for wages that rarely match what the experience is worth on paper. The blue walls, the desert nights, the Nawa rhythms, none of that exists for a camera. It exists because it always has, and tourism is simply a recent guest that showed up to watch. Maybe the real question isn't whether Morocco lives up to the title. It's whether you've ever once lived a single day the way the people who actually call this place home do. Up before sunrise, running a business, a farm, or a family with no drone shot waiting to capture it. If you want to see where a trip like this actually leads, there's a full itinerary breakdown in the description. And if you made it this far, you already know what to do next. One last thing worth saying plainly, none of this, the blue walls, the desert camps, the Nawa rhythms, was built for a camera to find. It was here first. The Instagram version of Morocco is a recent visitor to a place that's been running on its own terms for over 1,000 years. And it'll keep running long after the algorithm moves on to somewhere else. That's worth remembering the next time a 15-second clip makes a whole country look like a backdrop instead of a home.